Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Very good, very good.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Take your seats.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, perfect. And we can leave our subject.
Thanks a million, Martina. Thank you, Mari. Is Mari the correct pronunciation of your name? Thank you. I should have asked at the start. Thank you. And then just Angelika. There's a step here if you want, or depends how athletic you feel. Cool. We'll be kicking off presently. We're good. Roll it there, Oisin. We're on the ball. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Ambassador. My name is Barry Colfer, and I'm the Director of Research here at the Institute of International European Affairs. A very, very warm welcome. It's not too often we get to say good morning, because most of our events are on in the afternoon. So we're just so pleased to be kicking off our activities for 2026 on such an important topic and with such great speakers. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Ambassador Aslak Brun from the Norwegian Embassy to introduce Minister Lubna Jaffrey. But just to remind everybody, in case you're in the wrong classroom, we're here on the subject of strengthening resilience to disinformation. It is difficult to think of a more pertinent and more relevant discussion for our times. I'll say a little bit more about it in a moment. But I just want to say, after our words of welcome, just a word of sincere thanks to Minister Jaffrey and her team for carving out time in your busy schedule here in Ireland and for getting us into your program. I know it's not your first time here, but it's great to have you here at the Institute in this, really great and interesting part of town. So just a sincere welcome. But just to say as well, Ambassador Brun is one of our most kind of active and supportive members of the diplomatic community here, amongst others who are in the room. And it's really great to finally do something formal like this. And just indeed, your predecessor, Mari Skara, as well, was a great supporter and a great patron. So it's really, really nice to do something with the Royal Norwegian Embassy. And I hope it won't be the last time. So that's enough for me for the moment. I'm going to ask Ambassador Brun to stand up at the mic here and to introduce Minister Jaffrey. Minister Jaffrey will speak for about 7 minutes, and then it'll be over to our panel, who I'll introduce then.
Thank you, Barry. Distinguished guests, their colleagues, diversity of views is crucial for any society, but manipulating people by deliberately false information, that is a danger to democracy. So what can we do as governments? What's the role of government? What's the role of media and media regulators? What is the role of civil society actors? That is the theme of today's event. Both Norway and Ireland have experienced organized disinformation campaigns, including foreign information manipulation and interference. And both our countries have recently established government strategies to build resilience against disinformation. I would like to thank Barry and the team of IIA for organizing this event, and of course the panelists that will share their experience. And I would like to thank all of you for coming, both those that are here and those that follow online. It's great to see the wide interest in this topic. And it's now my pleasure to invite Lubna Jaffrey, the Norwegian Minister of Culture and Equality, to come up here to present her keynote remarks. So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Is on the record.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about an issue that strikes as at the very heart of democracy, disinformation, and what we as a nation are doing to confront it. Disinformation is not some distant storm on the horizon. It is here, growing stronger and spreading faster than ever, fueled by social media algorithms and artificial intelligence. This is not only a national challenge, it is global. When disinformation takes root, trust erodes. Truth and lies blur. Elections are threatened. and the fabric of democracy debate begins to fray. Norway's strategy for strengthening resilience to disinformation is our answer to this challenge. Presented in June 2025, shortly after Ireland launched theirs, it defined disinformation not merely as false information, but as deliberate, calculated manipulation designed to influence, distort, and divide. In a liberal democracy, debate must thrive. The real challenge is to protect the conditions for free opinion formation so citizens can make choices based on trustworthy, pluralistic information rather than manipulation. It is not illegal to misunderstand or make mistakes or to hold opinions contrary to consensus. In a democracy, authorities do not decide what people choose to believe in or not. But they do have a responsibility to facilitate a public sphere where citizens can seek truth and to provide the tools to do so. We value Ireland's national counter-disinformation strategy. Many of its priorities mirror ours. And as Ireland wisely notes, disinformation is a global problem with potentially significant implications at national and local levels. As a result, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. We must learn from each other and share what works. Norway is a society built on trust between citizens, institutions, and authorities. Our welfare system, highly quality education, and pluralistic media landscape are pillars of freedom and democracy. It makes us resilient. Disinformation is not yet a major problem in Norway, but we must remain vigilant. Foreign influence operations, declining use of editor-controlled media among youth, and rapid advances in AI could threaten public discourse over time. That is why our strategy emphasizes prevention, strengthening society so disinformation has less room to spread and less power to distort. It highlights 5 priority areas. 1, critical media literacy. In a digital society marked by information overload, the challenge is not access but judgment. People should be able to assess whether text, images, and videos are credible. Children and young people are especially vulnerable, so we will integrate media literacy in education, promote democratic values, and support libraries as arenas for informed debate. In 2026, we will also give financial support to an independent center for source awareness. 2, holding platforms accountable. Secondly, platforms shape what information reaches the public. When algorithms determine visibility without accountability, debate can be distorted. Norway will implement the Digital Service Act and other EEA relevant regulations, strengthen enforcement, improve transparency, and expand research across platform data. Last July, the government proposed 2 bills, an absolute age limit of 15 for social media and raising the age for consent to data processing from 13 to 15 to protect children from harmful content and misuse of personal data. 3, strengthening editorial media and journalism. Norway benefits from a strong public broadcaster, NRK, alongside a dynamic commercial media sector. Independent journalism is one of our strongest defenses against manipulation, yet faces economic pressure and fragmented audiences. We will review media support schemes to safeguard diversity, support investigative journalism, protect press freedom, and engage young people with trusted news, because an informed generation is essential for democracy. 4, building a stronger knowledge base. Furthermore, we must strengthen our knowledge base. Technology evolves quickly, and policy must be evidence-based. We will therefore establish a research center for long-term studies of public discourse and support Norwegian language academic journals. And 5, improving government coordination. Finally, we seek to strengthen government efforts and coordination. Prevention of disinformation requires shared situational awareness, risk assessment, and cooperation across agencies. An important measure will be the reinforcement of the Norwegian media authorities' mandate to resources to ensure an effective follow-up of initiatives in this field going forward. Dear everyone, the message is clear. Building resilience is not a one-off project. It is a sustained democratic discipline. Strengthening resilience to disinformation is not about controlling debate. It is about protecting their conditions for open debate, informed participation, and free democratic choice. No country can win this fight alone. Disinformation knows no borders, and neither should our response. Through cooperation and shared learning, we can ensure that truth remains stronger than lies. Learning from other countries is vital. This is why we value our dialogue with Ireland and others. It is encouraging to see that in many ways, we share the same priorities for the road ahead. Thank you so much.
Hang on to that, because what we're going to do in a slight variation to format, the panel is going to speak in a couple of moments, but for now, the Minister has agreed to take a couple of questions now so that she can sit down then and enjoy the rest of the discussion. There might be a chance to contribute from the floor during the Q&A as well, of course, but before we move to the panel, I see Donal at the back. Does anyone else, so Donal and John, anybody else going to take that pair of questions? There's a mic coming from thin air from somebody. Thank you, Kieran. No, apologies, Kieran. This only happened very just before we started the variation in the format. So we're also short on mics. You can tell we're just kicking off after the year. So Donal and then John will take the two questions before I invite you to answer, Minister. Could you just identify yourself, sorry, for the Minister?
The Institute. I have two queries. The first is, you mentioned a very strong public broadcaster. In how is that broadcaster funded and controlled? And secondly, I think I know the answer to this, but is the fact that you have a small minority language like Norwegian any protection whatsoever? Is the fact that your normal language of social discourse is a minority language, Norwegian, is that any protection against external disinformation?
And Minister, we are unfortunately short on mics, literally. So this is going to come back to you in a second. Thank you, Donal. Happy New Year. We have Professor John O'Brennan here as well, Kieran.
Thanks very much, John O'Brennan from Maynooth University. Minister, can I ask you specifically whether Norway has taken any measures yet to protect the integrity of elections? I'm conscious here that we have seen, for example, in Romania a couple of years ago, an overt act of malign interference in the presidential election, which had to be cancelled by the Supreme Court and run again. It happened in Moldova last year as well. This is especially interesting to Ireland, I think, in EU matters, because we're the only member state compelled to hold referendums on EU constitutional change. We may yet, in the near future, reach a point where malign actors are really interested, and we'll be holding a referendum in a completely changed information landscape to previously. So I'd be really interested to know what Norway is doing specifically to protect the integrity of elections. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now, everyone else, there will be a chance to contribute, but I'm going to ask the Minister to respond.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. First, on our national broadcaster, NRK. So they are 100% financed from the government. So we did have a license scheme like you do here in Ireland, but it was, I think it was in 2020, it was abolished, but we still do fund it nationally. But it's very important for me that the national broadcaster is independent. So it's an arm's length principle. It's very strong, and they have editorial freedom, of course. I know you have had a debate here in Ireland about, for instance, if the national broadcaster should be a part of the Eurovision Song Contest. This has also been a debate in Norway, but and people have said, you as the minister should tell the national broadcaster to boycott the Eurovision Song Contest. And I have said no. This is a question for the national broadcaster. It is an editorial question, and I'm not going to tell them what to do or not to do, because if that is the first stage of saying, okay, you shouldn't be a part of the Eurovision Song Contest because of Palestine and whatever is going on, what is the next thing I would do? So that is very important. When it comes to Norwegian as a language, yes, we are a small language. And And we have several languages in Norway. So in Norway, we have the bokmål, which is the main Norwegian language, and we have a nynorsk, which is a minority Norwegian language. But they are both as equal in the Norwegian language. And we also have minority languages like the Sami population, which is indigenous people. And we also have other minority languages as Kveni. So this is also part of the ministry's responsibility. We are also the Ministry of Languages. So of course, the Norwegian language is important. Therefore, also we have different demands for the national broadcaster when it comes to language, for instance. That is a part of it, to protect the Norwegian language. I would just like to tell you just what we have done this year's budget. We have proposed to use 45 million Norwegian kroner in building a Norwegian language model where we are paying the newspapers for their article and what they have written to train these Norwegian language models. Because we have large language models, which are Chinese, which are American. We know, everyone knows about this and they use it, but we also need the Norwegian narrative in the language models to show what our values are. So that is something we're doing. When it comes to elections, so it is actually not my ministry that is responsible for elections in Norway, but we have, of course, there are no evidence that the Norwegian elections have been tried to be manipulated. We just had a general election in September last year. And there is no evidence that someone has tried to manipulate Norwegian elections so far. But I think Mari, she can give you more insight in how the media authority are working with these subjects. Just before the elections, we actually had a meeting. I think Mari, you were represented there as well, together with all the big tech companies before the elections to be, ready if they would see anything that would look like a manipulation of the election. So not so far, but of course, this is something that our minister, she's minister of, how do you translate that? Municipalities, local government, thank you so much. So she's the Minister of Local Government, also in charge of elections in Norway. But she's, of course, she works very strongly with these issues. But so far, nothing gives us any reason to be worried, but we are, of course, very aware of that. This could happen. But so far, no evidence that this has been tried in Norway. Thank you.
Fantastic. So much, Minister. I'm going to take that. This is mine. I get to keep this, right? Thanks very much, Minister. Very kind. So the Minister is still with us, and the rest of you guys can relax because you all have lapel mics, so you don't have to be passing the mic around amongst yourselves. I'm going to say a little bit now about what's going to happen, but I do just have to indulge myself that we're really proud of our location here in the North Inner City in Dublin in the Revolutionary Quarter. And this building in the street that predates the state, not 200 meters away maybe a few more than 200 meters away, but at the General Post Office just on Big Boulevard, we're today celebrating the centenary of our national broadcaster, which continues to play a massive part in public discourse and in civic life in Ireland. So it feels very fitting to be having this discussion here approximate to that important celebration. So it's going to happen. I'm going to invite the panelists here, and thanks again for being here, to speak for 3 to 5 minutes. We have a system here. If you're going much over that, I'll signal to my colleague Enya there, and you'll start switching the lights on and off, right, if that happens. But it won't come to that. But what I'm saying, kind of half joking, I recognize the room here. So we have people from the government departments, from the regulators, from the embassies, from the universities, from media. And I know there's going to be loads of really good questions and comments. So I want to try and get to that in an appropriately quick time. The discussion, as I say, is on the record. Those joining online, hello, and those in person will be invited to ask their questions. When you do so, especially because we've guests in the room, just please identify yourself, say who you are and what you do, as it's relevant to the discussion. And if you wish to participate, we are active on LinkedIn and Instagram if you wish to comment during the discussion. So it's just left to me to identify our panel. So to my left, well, you're all to my left. First to my left, we have Mari Velsand, who is the Director General of the Norwegian Media Authority. Very warm welcome. Then many of you will recognize Martina Chapman, who's the National Coordinator at Media Literacy Ireland. You're fresh from your Oireachtas Committee performance yesterday, which I'm sure many of us have heard about and read about. in the news today. And then finally, we'll hear from Angelika, Sharygina, who is an AI and information integrity advisor and researcher at TCD, at Trinity College Dublin. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who's you, Mary.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation to discuss with you these important and timely issues. First, a little bit about the Norwegian Media Authority. Our mission is to support freedom of expression, media freedom, and an open and informed public discourse. Quite big and important issues. And I would say that we do this through two main pillars. First, we work to ensure media freedom and diversity. A pluralistic, independent media landscape is the backbone of democracy. And secondly, we promote media literacy because the ability to critically evaluate sources is fundamental to forming free opinions and making informed choices. And this, in the landscape at the moment, I think is more important than ever. But also these two pillars are under pressure across Europe and also globally. Press freedom is in decline. And last year, I'm sure many of you know this already, Reporters Without Borders described the global situation as difficult when it comes to the press freedom in their yearly index. Norway has for many years been on the top on this index. And we still are. It will be exciting to see if it continues this year. And as the minister highlighted, we benefit from strong editorial media, skilled journalists, and a long tradition of press self-regulation. But I would like to also underline the importance of active media policy. In Norway, public support for free and independent media through both funding schemes and regulation has broad political backing. We also have, I would say, a well-educated population and a high level of public trust, both in media, in our institutions, and also in one another. So in many ways, Norway is in a good position, but even in Norway, there are clear signs of risks. We are heavy media users, and the willingness to pay for news, digital news, is high. We are globally on the top also when it comes to this. But even though most Norwegians consume news daily, we see a worrying trend, and that goes especially for young people. In general, the use of editor-controlled media is declining, and as I said, especially among young people. Almost half of young Norwegians do not use editorial media as a source of news. That doesn't mean that they don't consume information and news, but you know where they find it, on social media. And that raises some serious concerns because these platforms do not have any editors. They are AI-driven recommendation engines, powerful tools for influence, and increasingly also for manipulation. With generative AI, it becomes harder, if not impossible, to distinguish between authentic and fabricated content. And language models can produce confident but false or biased responses. We conducted a survey last year within the Norwegian Media Authority, and we then found that 7 out of 10 Norwegians had encountered news they suspected were false. And the majority of this content came from social media. And only 1 out of 10 said that they find it easy to separate real from fake information online. So how do we respond to this? I want to underline the areas that the minister referred to in Norway's strategy, and especially 3 points: strong editorial media with broad reach, high levels of media literacy across all age groups. That is not easy, especially when it comes to groups that are not in school, and then understanding how algorithms and recommender systems work and knowing which sources you can trust or not. And last but not least, the importance of effective regulation of the large platforms, because these platforms now function as essential parts of our information infrastructure. And that is why ensuring transparency and democratic oversight without compromising freedom of expression is so important. But there is no single solution to the challenge of disinformation. I though think that it is a clear path forward. As the minister also mentioned, we have to work together across sectors, across countries, to strengthen editorial media, protect freedom of expression, and safeguard users' interests on the global platforms that now shape so much of the public discourse. So far, thank you.
Thanks so much, Mary. So there was, well, I mean, thank you. So there's a lot there talking about editorial rules, understanding AI and recommender systems, regulation, and more. Much food for thought. Martina.
Very much, Barry. Minister and Mary, and for the invitation to be here today. It was really interesting to hear your overview of the strategy, because a lot of it does chime very closely with the Irish strategy, which is reassuring. I'm here today wearing the Media Literacy Ireland hat, so I'm going to focus my contribution on media literacy and the role of media literacy in building resilience to disinformation. And I wanted to start with just explaining how Media Literacy Ireland kind of understands media literacy. Note I didn't say define media literacy, because there's no universally agreed definition of it. And part of the reason is it's a set of core skills and knowledge that we all need to develop in order to be able to function and participate effectively and responsibly and safely in a world that's dominated by digital media. And unfortunately, this is not a one hit and you're done process, because these skills change and evolve all the time, because technology evolves, as we see all the time, and throws up new challenges for us to address. Individual needs change. So when we're in different life stages, we have different needs, different demands, and as a result, different media literacy needs as well. Social norms change, and even legislation changes, and all of these changes mean that we need to continually upgrade our skills. So what we media literacy is lifelong learning, and this is a challenge, because there is a formal education system for people in up to the age of 16 or 18 or early 20s, whatever it is. But it becomes much more difficult at that point, when people leave a formal education system, as Mara was saying, to be able to engage on a regular basis with people to help them develop skills and knowledge, and critical knowledge. And when we talk about media literacy as well, and our core skills and knowledge, central to it is the ability to understand media messages and to make informed decisions about the media content and services that we're all engaging with all the time. And in order to be able to do that, we need to understand how media is made, who owns it, how it's operated, and how it's regulated. And that's a challenge in itself. We also need to understand the different bits of legislation around it and regulation. And even for those of us working in the area, that can be a challenge. So if you're just a normal person going around your daily business, it's quite a big ask. And international best practice shows us that the most effective way to approach media literacy is through this cross-sector approach. So multi-stakeholder cross-sector approach. And in terms of Media Literacy Ireland, that's something that we've been doing for almost a decade now. We were one of kind of the early adopters, if you like, of this approach. And that's worked really, really well in Ireland. And as a result, like Media Literacy Ireland, it's an informal alliance, people and organisations who are working together on a mainly voluntary basis to promote media literacy. And MLI is funded and facilitated by the regulator, Commissioner Mann. And it originated with the BAI as the predecessor, with their media literacy policy, which recognised the societal impact, the positive impact that promoting media literacy had. And as part of their policy, committed to facilitating this network, this cross-sector network. As a result, what we've been able to do is build a kind of an informal communications and delivery infrastructure. And it is informal, and it is dependent on the kind of the will, the goodwill of a lot of different members. And we have huge success stories like the B&B Smart campaign, which had the Stop Think Check message, which was adopted in Norway and then in Iceland and in other countries. But, you know, we also, as more pressure comes to deliver media literacy across that wider kind of part of society, we need to build in more kind of robust structures. And the importance of media literacy is recognised in national strategies. So in the National Counter-Disinformation strategies, we have we have 9 key areas of work. And one of those key areas, like you, is specifically around delivering media literacy as lifelong learning. But I do want to just have one little caveat here. It's always a worry. I've been working in media literacy for a long time, and it's always a worry when I see it being highlighted as a kind of a, not quite a cure, but a central piece of something, whether that's online safety or digital participation or digital engagement or disinformation. Media literacy is a set of skills. It's not a corrective action. And we need to look at it as part of a wider set of actions that take place. And I think you said it's more about the preventative benefit and the preventative power of media literacy. You know, because somebody can have fantastic powers of evaluation, but we all have our own personal biases and beliefs, and for very good reasons. And if we're targeted, specifically targeted with disinformation and triggered by our personal beliefs and biases, all the media literacy in the world is going to have a hard job to stop us believing that narrative. So I think we need to be realistic in terms of the limitations of media literacy as well.
Fantastic.
I think I've probably gone over my time.
You're nearly spot on time, but thank you, Martina. It's really, really interesting. I'm from the off thinking about the distinction between a definition, trying to define something, trying to understand it, the kind of key combination of like education and regulation, but also what you were saying about the kind of the multi-stakeholder engagement. There's so much to learn. The answer is very often like the Nordics when you're trying to like find out how to do policy better. And I know Norway has this really proud tradition of social dialogue and social consultation and multi-stakeholder engagement. So there's probably something to learn from our visitors in that regard as well. Thanks a million, Martina. Over to you, Angelika.
Touching upon Martina's point on that we are being targeted, that is actually the key area of my research in war zones and cognitive warfare, whereas we as civil society are being targeted by different actors at speed using artificial intelligence. And we moved very fast from our AI deepfakes actually happening to which next election is going to be manipulated by artificial intelligence and malicious actors using AI to spread division, hate, violence, and polarization. So as Minister has very importantly emphasized, it is a very big priority for nations to engage in collaboration against cognitive warfare. That I see the cognitive warfare as disinformation targeted campaigns aimed at changing perception of citizens and changing behaviors, which is already happening, unfortunately, in many countries. So I would say that the biggest suggestion would be treating disinformation and AI-related threats to democracies not as national priority, but as cross-European mission, because as United Europe, we face the same problem, and that problem is actually disinformation that is scaled at such unprecedented rate to make sure that the societies are polarized and the citizens are being targeted. And I'm looking at disinformation as a virus. And I think that's a very good analogy, because when you look at disinformation as a virus, you could actually see the rates of spread and potentially borrow some of the medical interventions that could potentially stop the spread. And one of those interventions is inoculation, so building societal response to disinformation via inoculating a society through simulations of small doses of viruses that citizens can develop their cognitive resilience and be more succinct and able to discover disinformation itself. And I saw a lot of examples of disinformation being used in war zones where unfortunately that led to losses of lives. So disinformation is no longer a good to have topic or a topic that we need to just to think and do some interventions. It's a topic that can actually result in losses of lives in certain countries. And unfortunately, as we were thinking that it's only the problem that extreme to crisis regions, disinformation is targeted at children and vulnerable communities across the world. And with 260 laws on AI regulation, we still have the problem when children are dying using chatbots or being disinformed or not having sufficient guardrails against tech providers that are using technology that are actually not properly using technology before it's safe for citizens. A European Union AI Act aims to protect us from AI-generated threats, but as this field evolves, there is no one-stop solution, and unfortunately, AI Act doesn't target deepfakes, pornographic deepfakes, and a lot of different things that are aimed to completely differently look at the situation of information integrity and safety online for women and children. So there's lots of things that are still need to be taken into consideration, but I think that the most important is we cannot have one-stop solution. It's not only media literacy, inoculation, nudging, labeling, or fact-checking. There's no one credible intervention. It is multi-component interventions that need to work together, and it's cross-European priorities that need to be set clearly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelika. So indeed, kind of that chimes with a little bit with what was said previously, this kind of multifactorial approach. There isn't one approach to such a complex and important problem. I'm also glad that you led with how all this refers to cognitive warfare on your area of research, but it's really clear to me as a non-expert, but as a daily consumer of a lot of media, that the previous speakers had me thinking about social cohesion, about health, about productivity, about how media and media literacy feeds into all of those things, but also just frankly national security. And you're talking about the whole of society approach to security ought to take in media literacy and kind of media regulation and the themes we've discussed. So I've really enjoyed your remarks, everybody, and thanks very much. We have the room for a while yet. Can I get a sense from the audience if there are any questions that people would like to put to the panel? We have a couple that have come in online that I can reach for as well. I should also, thank you very much. And I should also, it was remiss of me, I'm going to come to you in a second. What I should have said as well, if the answer to this can be no, but if Mary or Martina want to comment on what Angelika said, or if Mary, if you want to comment on what Martina said, seeing as you guys as the order of speakers who went. Do you want to say anything, Mary, and what was
I can add a couple of
come to you then.
Comments. I think Martina pointed on a really important issue, talking about media literacy as a kind of lifelong process, and also that there we have a problem because getting media literacy into the school system is one thing, and luckily that is much better today than when all of us went to school. So my kids being 18 and 20 years old have been learning media literacy and source criticism since they started school. But how do we assess grown-up people? We have identified through our service older people also as a vulnerable group, like from 60, 65 and up. They are also main consumers of information, and they are used to that everything they read is true. So they access information with less criticism than younger people. and it's not one place to go to reach them. So I think none of us really have found the solution on that, and that I think we really have to work on. And probably it's not going to be one solution, but we need to access also the older groups in a more in a better way, really. So that was one thing I wanted to comment on, and then very short also about this not being a national problem. And because of that, I think the EU regulation is really important. You already have the Digital Services Act running here in Ireland. We are anxious to get it implemented in the national law in Norway as well, because I think that will be very important for the time to come.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mari. Martina, do you want to comment on anything?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of agreement, I think, and parallel kind of thoughts between the three of us. But I agree. I think one of the challenges with the general public, we kind of need to ban that as a term when we're talking about people. We're not one big homogenous group. And it's even with older people are not one big homogenous group. And when we talk about vulnerable groups, we're all actually vulnerable, every single one of us. We're just vulnerable in different ways. And I think what we really need, and this is difficult, but we need insight. It's kind of ironic that I'm saying it's difficult to get this really detailed insight on people when we've actually given all of this detailed insight away for free to platforms. But we need that detailed insight on much, much smaller groups. And we probably need to think of our audiences, if you want to call them that, in terms of communities rather than demographics. Because I think a lot of this, and this touches on your points, a lot of this is also about behavior change. And behavior change is not quick, and it's not cheap, and it involves a lot of stages and a lot of resources as well. But I think if I had a magic wand, it would be looking for that detailed insight, and it's about nudging, and it's almost like we need to learn to fight fire with fire, because the platforms are doing it so well.
One tiny one as well, and forgive me, during your remarks, you referred to a campaign that you said had been successful. What was the name of that campaign?
That was a campaign that actually originated in 2019. The European Commission wanted all of the member states to do something in the run-up to the European elections in 2019. I think, yeah, 2019. And I'm part of the media literacy expert group, and we had kind of said, well, a campaign might not be the way to go, and maybe not with 12 weeks notice to do it, but obviously that was the position we all ended up in. And at the time, Media Literacy Ireland said, okay, well, we'll try and do something with the support of the regulator and with the support of some of the key members, including the journals that were instrumental in it. And very quickly, because there was a will, we were able to develop a campaign message, which was very simple. It was stop, think, check, and that the information you're getting is accurate and reliable. We didn't talk about truth. And it was a very general message that any organization could use, and lots of media organizations did use it. And there was, and because of its simplicity, and to make it,
that's accidental. Don't worry.
Could I also comment shortly on that?
Once Martina's finished, of course.
But just in terms of that campaign, it was successful, but because individual organizations could take it and could develop it in a way that resonated with their own audiences. So it wasn't kind of one single brand. It was a core message that was then disseminated out through communities.
What was it called, the initiative again?
The campaign was called Be Media Smart, and the message was Stop, Think, Check.
Amazing. Okay, Mari wanted to come in quickly.
Yeah, because this is a really great example, I think, how we can cooperate. Because we have a close cooperation in between the media authorities throughout Europe. And because we know each other, we also exchanged experiences. So I heard about this campaign from my Irish colleagues, and I contacted them and asked, could we use this framework and put our own content into it? and they were very positive. So we did that, and also developed a campaign that was successful in Norway. And we have used the framework several times, but with different kind of content lately before the last general election in Norway. So it's just a great example that we can cooperate between the countries and that we all face the same challenges.
Which is probably our main mission here, by the way, to try and identify such examples or such opportunities. So thank you. Angelika, quickly, and then we'll go to the questions because people are going to come in.
And just as much as we need media literacy, we really are in urgent need of AI literacy, national AI literacy, which we don't have as of yet in Ireland. And I would like to state that Ireland currently on the 30th in the list of AI safety report, which is very dangerous because countries that are top are the ones that actually have AI literacy strategy, national AI literacy strategy. So with the unprecedented amount of deepfakes and AI threats rising every single day, and with new developing technologies and with new models of large language models, LLMs, as you know, are developing so quickly, we absolutely must have this priority in our policy, and that's where what we lack. And I'm sure that there's lots of people that would agree that AI literacy campaigns can change a lot, especially on vulnerable groups. And as we are all, as Martina mentioned, are vulnerable in some ways, it will help everyone in the society to know their rights in terms of AI chatbots and to understand when AI chatbot actually hallucinates and lies to you, because what it is meant to do in many instances is to be more agreeable, not to generate more truthful responses. So there are lots of things around that where we must treat this as one of the key pillars for our policies.
Absolutely, and I feel that may be a discussion in our future we should organise here. Ireland came 30th globally-ish, is that what you said? Who's in the top 5, and is it the Nordics?
So there's Nordics. I know that Finland also is one of the top because they have a lot on that. But yeah, I think that the key priority here is just to go forward with AI literacy.
Thank you very much. I've identified 2 hands. So there's one here and one here. If you can both just introduce yourselves to the panel and wait for the mic before speaking. And also, if you're identifying someone on the panel specifically, please say so.
My name is Dawn Clancy. I'm a journalist and I report on the United Nations. I have 2 questions. One is for Ms. Chapman. You talked about how difficult it can be for the average person to engage with that media literacy. It's a lifelong process. But I'm thinking, if you have someone online that's sitting in front of their computer right now and they're scrolling through social media, they stop on a post, what's one step that they can take to begin to think critically? What kind of questions can they ask themselves about how to gauge the level of disinformation or not? And then I have a question for Ms. Sharygina. Did I get that right? You mentioned that this, in terms of conflict, disinformation, if I heard you correctly, can lead to children dying in conflict scenarios. And that I'm really curious about that, if maybe you have a specific example that you could share that could show how that unfolds. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran might bring the mic to this lady here. You did have your hand up, didn't you? Yeah, great. So Kieran will bring you the mic and then over to you. And thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel. My name is Mary Stefanazzi. I'm an independent academic researcher. And as I listened, I was curious about if anything is happening at any level, on the level of education. I'm thinking of young children, because misinformation is nothing new. It's been happening. Sure, all the talk about the Christianity and the heretics, that was misinformation. So there's nothing new in it, really. We've different methods. But I'm interested how much the personal development and the capacity to think critically needs development. And I think that needs to start at national level. You know, in the years prior, they were taught philosophy and logic and disputation. I'm not aware of anything. No, I have a small window, but I'm interested if anything on that line is happening from any of the panel.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's great. I'm going to propose that we work with those 3, and I'm going to suggest we go in the opposite direction. So I'll invite Angelika and then Martina and then Mary to come in. So there's from Dawn 2 questions, one on thinking critically and on the example of risk to children, and then Mary, the question on education and also critical thinking. Angelika.
To the very important question on disinformation in war zones, I personally had experience working in war zones, and I've seen a lot of experiences of other people in war zones, in current existing conflicts, both in Afghanistan, Ukraine, Gaza, how misinformation actually shaped the false narrative. And one of the examples is evacuation points. For example, there's a lot of misinformation that is unmoderated. Channels like Telegram are becoming that safe haven for people that want to create fake news, disinform, and create polarization and seed violence. So in terms of conflict, evacuation points are usually not very well declared when it's time to evacuate. And when conflict begins and there's an importance to evacuate immediately, some Telegram channels and some groups would say that this is the area you should go, and that's the area where women and children would go, whereas that would be actually a compromised channel by an actor that is in the position of power, and that could potentially lead to losses of lives. And that what happened to some people that were crossing borders in the situation where they were not supposed to cross. And at that time, nobody really looks who is in the car crossing or who is trying to evacuate. So one of those issues in terms of immediate crisis, that's where disinformers actually really succeed. And in terms of general, that would be very interesting, I guess, here to note for the public that AI and also unmoderated platforms are being used as recruitment platforms for children in crisis regions by different groups. And basically children are and teenagers are being targeted to be spies even. So that is something that is completely shocking, but that's what happens. And there's different scenarios where disinformation campaigners are using fake videos and sharing that that some family members or soldiers are being captured to sow division and chaos. So also there's completely, I mean, I can talk about this a lot, so just please stop me. But there's lots of situations where actually their event never occurred, but to undermine the morale of the army, there would be deep fake campaigns used at certain soldiers just to make them surrender. In terms of, it's a very interesting also in terms of Russian disinformation campaigns. The European support and international support was undermined by malicious actors using deepfake technology, saying that there is lots of unprecedented ways where Europe doesn't support anymore, let's say. And there's lots of bots, farm trolls, and it's very important to know that it's very cost efficient. I would say it's even cheap operations, because in the past it used you needed to have like 10 people on board. Now you need just one AI LLM that is usually free, and you can create all these disinformation campaigns at large. So at this point, it's very easy to manipulate public.
Fantastic, thank you. Martina?
In terms of the, somebody sitting watching their content, this goes back to the stop, think, check messages. So it's first of all being aware of how did this content get to me? Who has created it? How is it funded? What might their motivations be? We also need to be aware of what are my own biases. Why am I reacting to this particular piece of information in the way that I'm reacting? The whole stop piece is, stop before you hit share or like or comment. Think about some of these things. So understanding where that content has come from, why are you reacting to it the way you're reacting? But also a really important one is check, is this being reported anywhere else? Is it being reported on reputable sites? And also checking for the detail. Does it include references? Does it include external links? Does it include, is the language correct? Does it look like it's AI generated? So it's those kind of things. But the reality is, when we're all sitting there doom scrolling, we are not doing that to every single piece of content. But at the very least, if we can encourage people to get to the point where if they're feeling emotional about a piece of content before they hit share or like or comment, that they do that stop, think, check. That's a little behavior change that if we can get to that point, that's a step forward.
so much, Marianne. I don't know if you want to pick up the question on education and heresy, for example.
Yeah, I'll do that. Just a short comment to what you said, because earlier we could advise to look into this piece of information, but now it's almost impossible to detect if that piece of information is fake, false, or true. So it's being more important to look for the source, I think. What's the source? And to identify which sources can you trust. And because of that, I think editorial media is more important than ever, because the way they are structured, because they have an editor, of course they can also do mistakes, but it's not mistakes on purpose. And they will correct if someone tells them or asked and they see that they have done something wrong. So because of AI, it's not anymore. Earlier we could say that if it's a picture, it's authentic. If it's the voice, you know, but now you can create a video. We have tested it. I'm sure many of you have a video, and you can see me saying something. It's my voice, but it doesn't need to be me. And because of that, it's much harder. Just the last months, the last years.
I think you're right. And I think there's an opportunity here for editorial media, because they have the verification processes. And as it becomes much more difficult for individuals to verify, they will, hopefully, they'll start to outsource that again to kind of the reputable media. But there is also that risk that, you know, there was a phrase that used to be used often, like do your own research. We don't use that phrase anymore, because do your own research.
It's very difficult.
You know, your own biases are the first thing that kick in that place.
And then short comment on the education. It's not my main responsibility, but I will comment it anyway, because I think in Norway it's been more emphasized in school, and a few years ago it was a new like a learning plan. So then media literacy came into the different subjects in a more structured way. And what I think is really important with media literacy is that it's not okay, this is media literacy, and then it's not a part of other subjects, because it needs to be implemented in English lessons, in Norwegian lessons, in history lessons, in, you know, anything. And I'm not saying that we are where we should be, but I think it's much better than it used to be. And then it needs to be improved all the time.
Thank you, Mary. We are up against the clock a bit. Angelika, you wanted to come in, are you?
The education.
Yeah, in a minute if you could.
Sure. We did a test pilot on education AI literacy initiative in Ireland with the 5 schools, and the results were shocking. Children are using AI-generated disinformation all the time. They spend a lot of time on platforms like Roblox, and the screen time is more than ever. One person reported that they spent 12 hours during just one weekend on one of the platforms. So imagine the time on screen is not even doubled, it's tripled since the previous generation, even more. Now they are under attacks of different actors, and the questionnaires that and also the exposure that we conducted found that AI is being, and not just AI, actors that are using AI to create fake news and polarization across different children's groups and teenagers is something that is at rise even in Ireland.
Can I very quickly point to a source of support on this here in Ireland? You're right, media literacy needs to start from the minute you get a screen. There's an organisation called webwise.ie, and they are funded partially through the Department of Education. They create fantastic resources for teachers, for students, and for parents. And they're very up to date, they're very easy to access, it's freely accessible. And when it comes to especially young children, unfortunately, as a parent, my heart sinks, but as it is the job of parents first and foremost. But we have to support parents. We have to be able to provide them with easily digestible resources, and webwise.ie is a great place to start.
Really, really good and really helpful as a parent of small kids as well. Good to know about this resource. Okay, we are up against the clock. I want to invite, this is a very experienced room. I would invite, unusually, if anybody wants to make a comment rather than a question, just to give people an opportunity to do so. Cool. There were a couple of questions online. We're not going to get to them, unfortunately, but just to thank Conor Nelson and Gianmarco Monicelli for their questions, which you will share with the panel. I think it's always good to know what kind of questions you elicit from people. And I am going to put you on the spot, and you can say no. Would you like to say anything for a minute, Minister, if we bring the mic to you, or are you happy to sit it out? Can you just bring the Minister the mic, please, and then we can draw things to a close. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been so interesting and enlightening to listen to you, because I think, as I said in my remarks, this is a global issue, and we know we need to go together and we need to learn from each other. And there are so many things to learn from other people doing good work, both in the academia and, of course, in the media literacy part of it. So I'd just like to thank you so much. And I think this is something, as a politician, you will never be done with this subject and be working on it. And the challenge is, as also you very wisely in the panel put it, that the technology is just developing so fast that the things we're discussing here today could be just outdated in a couple of years. That is quite frightening. But I am a positive person and I have a positive outlook on the world. So hopefully, I think we will together be able to come on the other side more clever and wiser, and hopefully also to upholding the democratic principles that we are so hardly fighting for these days. So thank you so much.
Perfect point in which to conclude. And you said a couple of, the technology is probably different now from when we started this discussion, right? But no, but really, I really enjoyed that. And there is so much for us to work with in terms of the rest of our program. So selfishly, thanks very much for pointing me in the way of some really interesting and important things. So thank you very much for our panel. Thank you to the Minister. Thank you to our colleagues at the Norwegian Embassy. If we can just thank them in the traditional way, and see you guys next time.